The dunes of the Arizona Territory had no memory, and Matilda Bishop was praying they had no eyes. In a land that swallowed secrets, she had just found one that might swallow her whole. She was dragging a body a man who was the sworn enemy of every settler in the county, a man who was supposed to be a savage. But as the first light of dawn broke over the razor's edge of the horizon, this savage would use his last breath to give her a name. She would have to carry a burden that would change everything he called her his lifeline. The only thing more brittle than the sun-baked soil of Sandstone Reach was the hope of the people who lived on it. Matilda Tilly Bishop knew this better than anyone. She and her father, Martin Bishop, ran the Bishop's Respite, a way station that hadn't seen a paying customer in 3 months. The main stage line had rerouted north, leaving them stranded on a sea of cracked adobe and shimmering heat. Their land, wedged between the unforgiving dunes and the jagged dragoon foothills, was worthless. At least that's what everyone said. Everyone, that is, except Mr. Barnaby Fry. Fry was a man who dressed in eastern wool suits, even when the temperature boiled the mercury in the thermometer. He was a land speculator from Tucson, and he wanted the Bishop's respite. He wanted it with a predatory patience that terrified Matilda more than a rattlesnake's warning. "Martin, you're a good man, but a failed one," Fry had said just last week, his polished boot resting on their porch rail. "The bank in Tucson holds your note. I hold the bank. Sign the land over and I'll wipe the debt. It's a mercy." Martin Bishop, a man worn down to a nub by drought, and grief had just stared at his hands. I need a time, Mr. Fry. Time is the one thing this land doesn't give." Fry had sneered before riding off with his 2 surveyor's men, who looked more like hired gunslingers. Matilda despised Fry, but she also despised the dust. It was in her food, her water, her lungs. It was the taste of failure. That morning she had ridden out on their last half-lame mare, Clementine, to check the line on their final dry well. She was looking for a miracle, but she would have settled for a damp patch of mud. She was 3 miles from home when the sky turned a sickly, bruised yellow. It wasn't a normal shift in the weather. It was the whisper before the scream. A sandstorm. She had no time to make it to shelter. She dismounted, pulling Clementine low and covering her own face with her neckerchief. The wind hit them like a physical blow, a solid wall of grit that scoured the world clean of sound and sight. For hours she huddled against the meager protection of a sandstone outcrop, the world reduced to a howling brown void. She lost all sense of time, her only anchor, the terrified breathing of the horse beside her. The storm passed as brutally as it had arrived. It didn't taper off. It simply ceased, leaving behind a new alien landscape. The dunes had shifted. Every landmark was gone. Matilda was lost. Clementine was favoring her left foreleg, and the water in Matilda's canteen was thick with silt. Panic, cold and sharp, began to prickle at her. She climbed to the top of a dune to get her bearings, but the world was a uniform sea of reddish gold. And then she saw it. It wasn't a cactus, and it wasn't a rock. It was a patch of darker color, a stain of blue and black against the sand, partially buried by the new drift. Her first thought was cattle. Maybe one of theirs strayed and caught in the storm. She slid down the dune, her boots sinking. It was not cattle. It was a man. He was lying face down, one arm flung out, as if reaching for something that wasn't there. He was dressed not in buckskin, but in the tattered remnants of settlers' trousers and a dark blue shirt ripped to shreds. His black hair was matted with sand and something darker, something wet. She nudged his boot with her toe. "Mister." No response. She knelt her heart, pounding a drum against her ribs, and pulled at his shoulder to roll him over. He was heavy, a dead weight. When he turned, she gasped and fell back. His face was gaunt, his lips cracked and bleeding, but his features were sharp, angular, and unmistakably Apache. Her blood ran cold. This was the enemy. The hostiles that Barnaby Fry and the men in town were always using as an excuse for more patrols, more guns. The boogeyman of the territory. Stories of their raids, of their cruelty were told in hushed whispers. She should leave him. To be found with him, to help him, was a betrayal. It could get her and her father killed. She stood up, brushing the sand from her hands, ready to walk away. But the man groaned. It was a low animal sound of pure agony. His eyes flickered open, but they were milky and unfocused. He wasn't a warrior. He was just a dying man. "Water," he whispered, his voice like sandpaper. Matilda was frozen. Every instinct screamed at her to run. This was a trick. He'd spring up, pull a knife. But he didn't move. He just lay there, the sand, already drinking the dark, sluggish blood that seeped from a wound high on his ribs. It was an old wound, she realized. A bullet wound, ragged and infected. This man hadn't been in the storm. He'd been dying before it. "Damn it!" she muttered. She unslung her canteen. She looked at the murky water, her own throat burning, and then at the dying man. She dripped a few drops onto his lips. He choked, then swallowed his entire body, convulsing with the effort. His eyes focused just for a second. He saw her. Matilda looked at the vast, empty desert. The dunes had no memory, and they had no mercy. If she left him, she was no better than the land itself. "Can you stand?" she asked, her voice harsh. He couldn't. He tried to push himself up and collapsed. She looked at her lame horse, then at the man. She had a rope. She could tie him to the saddle. But Clementine could barely carry herself, let alone a second person. There was only one way. "All right," she said to herself, grabbing him under the arms. "All right, we're doing this." The word drag was too simple. It didn't capture the grinding, soul-destroying reality of it. Matilda first tried to make a travois. She used her rope and a few brittle branches of creosote she found, but the man was too heavy, and the branches snapped within 100 yards. The failure sent another jolt of despair through her. He was a big man, lean but solid with muscle, and he was completely limp. He was in and out of consciousness, muttering in a language she didn't understand, a guttural rhythmic flow of words that terrified and fascinated her. So she resolved to a more brutal method. She looped the rope under his arms and tied it around her own waist, using her body as the harness. Clementine, bless her, limped behind, carrying their now empty canteens. Matilda pulled. The first mile was agony. The soft sand of the dunes gave no purchase. For every 2 steps forward, she slid one back. The rope bit into her waist. The man's boots, or what was left of them, carved 2 deep furrows in the sand. He moaned every time they hit a rock or a dip. "I'm sorry," she'd gasp, not knowing if he could hear. "I'm sorry I'm trying." The sun, freed from the storm clouds, returned with a vengeance. It wasn't just heat, it was a weight. It pressed down on her, trying to drive her into the sand alongside the man she was towing. Her own thirst became a living thing, a demon on her shoulder, whispering for her to cut the rope to save herself. She thought about her father, Martin, alone at the way station. She thought about Barnaby Fry, and the thought of him winning, of him taking their land, was what put steel back in her spine. If she died out here, Fry won. So she pulled. She stopped thinking about miles and started thinking in yards, to that clump of yucca, to that shadow. Just 10 more pulls. The man behind her was her anchor, and her burden. Once she slipped, falling to her knees. The rope went taut, pulling her back. She cried out a raw, frustrated sob. She turned to look at him. His eyes were open. He was watching her. There was no malice in his gaze, no hatred, just a bottomless, agonizing pain. He was lucid. "Leave me," he rasped, his English perfect, shockingly clear. "You're killing yourself." "You talk," she said stupidly, her breath coming in ragged pants. "Not for long." He coughed, and a fresh bloom of red appeared on his lips. "They'll hang you for this." "Who's they?" she demanded, pulling herself up. He didn't answer. He just closed his eyes. "We're not dying here," Matilda stated. It wasn't a promise to him. It was a command to the universe. "I won't let Barnaby Fry dance on my grave." The man's name apparently was not a concern of his. She reset her footing, leaned into the rope, and pulled again. The rest of the day was a blur of grit sweat and a burning coppery red haze. She lost her hat. The sun blistered the skin on her face and the back of her neck. As the sun finally touched the western horizon, painting the sky in colors of blood and fire, she saw it, the dark line of the foothills. She wasn't home, but she was close. She knew a place, a small cave, a shelter she and her father used to use when hunting. She pulled for another hour, her legs screaming, her lungs on fire. She finally collapsed, dragging the man into the shallow overhang of the rock face just as the last of the light died. She had no water, no food, no fire. She had only this dying Apache. She untied the rope from her waist, her skin raw and bleeding underneath, and slumped against the rock wall. She must have dozed off, lulled by a state of exhaustion, so deep it felt like dying. She awoke to a sliver of pre-dawn light. It was cold. She was shivering. Then she realized there was a weight across her legs. The man had, in his delirium, or in a final conscious act, rolled closer to her. His head was resting near her hip, his body acting as a partial blanket against the desert cold. He was shivering too. His fever was raging. She looked down at this stranger, this enemy. She had dragged him 3 miles. She had shared his fever and his pain. His eyes opened. The fever had broken, or at least receded. The lucidity was back. He looked at her, at the raw rope burns on her hands, at her blistered face. He looked at the cave entrance, and then back at her. "Dawn," he whispered. "It is—" she said, her voice a croak. He reached up, his hand shaking, and his fingers brushed the rope still looped around his chest. He traced it with his gaze back to where it lay, coiled by her side. "You are my lifeline," he breathed, and then he slipped back into unconsciousness. His name was Cale. It took 2 more days. Matilda left him in the cave, took Clementine, and rode the agonizing 2 miles to the way station. She returned with a small keg of water bandages and a half loaf of stale bread. Her father, Martin, was frantic. "Tilly, where in God's name? You look half dead." "Later, Pa," she said, her voice flat. I need the bilge water from the barrel, and the laudanum." She didn't tell her father. Not yet. She couldn't. For 2 days, she lived a double life. By day, she helped her father patch the storm-damaged roof. By night, she slipped away to the cave, cleaning Kyle's wound, forcing water and broth between his lips. The wound was bad. The bullet had gone clean through, but it was festering. She used the last of their precious corn whiskey to clean it, a move that caused Kyle to scream, a muffled, terrible sound that echoed in the tiny cave. On the 3rd night, his fever broke for good. She was changing his bandage when his hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. It wasn't a strong grip, but it was fast. She yelped. "Who are you?" he demanded, his eyes clear and sharp. "I'm the woman who's been keeping you alive." Matilda shot back, snatching her wrist away. "My name is Matilda Bishop." He studied her. His gaze was unnerving, as if he were cataloguing her, not just looking. "Why, I don't know," she said honestly, sitting back on her heels. "I think I was too mad at the desert to let it win. Not that day." He accepted this. "Kyle," he said, touching his own chest. "My name is Kyle. You're Apache." He nodded. "I am, and I am not." He spoke slowly, his voice weak, but his English was educated, the cadence only slightly accented. He told her his story. He wasn't a raider. He was a scout. Or he had been. "A scout for who?" "The United States Army, he said, and the bitterness in his voice was so profound it made Matilda shiver. "Based out of Fort Grant, I was a bridge. I thought I could be a bridge between my people and yours." "What happened?" "The bridge burned," Kyle said. "My commander, a captain, Gregory Pike. He is a man like your Mr. Fry." Matilda froze. "You know of Fry?" "I know the type. Pike is a man who sees land, not for what it is, but for what it can be worth. He had me scouting new territory for the peace treaty," he said, "to map the boundaries. But the boundaries kept changing. My people were being pushed from lands the treaty protected. Fry is doing the same," she whispered. "He's using the drought the bank. He's squeezing us all out." "It's the same snake, Matilda. Different head," Kyle said. "I found out why. Pike was selling his maps, his scouting reports, my scouting reports. He was selling them to a private company, a land speculation company from Tucson." "Barnaby Fry," she said. "It wasn't a question. I don't know the name, but he fits the suit. I confronted Pike. I told him I would report him to the general. He smiled. He said I was a credit to my people." Kyle's face darkened. "That night his men came for me. The men I had ridden with, eaten with. They shot me. He touched his side. "This was from my own rifle given to me by the army. I played dead. I crawled for a day, and then I ran. Until the storm. Until you." A new terrible silence settled in the cave. This changed everything. This wasn't a random savage. This was a whistleblower, a witness, and he had just linked the army to Barnaby Fry. "You can't stay here," Matilda said, her mind racing. "Fry's men are always around. If they find you—" "They will not find me," Kyle said. "They will find the woman who helped me." He was right. "You have to get to the way station," she said, making the decision. "I can hide you in the old root cellar. It's safer than out here. And your father. I'll handle my father." Getting him there was another ordeal, but this time he could walk leaning on her. They moved under the cover of a moonless night. She snuck him into the barn, into the small, dusty root cellar, hidden beneath a stack of old feed sacks. She had just settled him with a blanket when the barn door creaked open. Matilda, her father Martin, stood silhouetted in the doorway, holding a lantern. "Pa, just stay calm." The lantern light swung around, illuminating the dark shape of Cale in the corner. Martin Bishop's face went white as bleached bone. He dropped the lantern, which sputtered and died, plunging them into darkness. "Pa! Get it out!" Martin whispered, his voice shaking with a terror that was deeper than anger. "Get it out of my barn, Matilda, now! He's not an it, Pa! He's a man. His name is Cale. I don't care what his name is." Martin's voice rose, cracking. He scrambled to light a match, his hands shaking so badly it took 3 tries. The flame illuminated his wild, terrified eyes. "Do you know what they do to settlers who harbor hostiles? They burn the house first, Tilly. Then they hang what's left. We've lost everything. I will not lose you to He's not a hostile, Matilda argued, stepping between her father and the man in the corner. He's hurt. He was an army scout. He was betrayed. They're all betrayed. Martin roared, a rare burst of anger. They're betrayed by us. We're betrayed by them. It's the way of this land. But you don't bring the war into your own home. He's the one who can save our home, Matilda said, lowering her voice, trying to will her father into calmness. Pa, he knows about Fry. That gave Martin pause. What about Fry? Before she could explain, another sound cut through the tense quiet, the jingle of harnesses and the low murmur of voices. Someone's here, Martin hissed, blowing out the match. Matilda's heart leaped into her throat. She ran to the barn door and peered through a crack in the wood. A wagon had pulled up to the main house. Barnaby Fry. And this time he wasn't alone. He had his 2 surveyors and 2 other men. One of them, a gaunt man with a face like a dried apple, wore a tin star. Marshal John Wade, Martin breathed from behind her. He's brought the law. That's not the law, Pa. That's a prop. Fry and the marshal were walking toward the porch, but one man stayed behind. He was tall, thin, and moved with a disturbing, silent grace. He lit a cigarette, the flame briefly lighting up his hollow cheeks and dead eyes. He wore a long grey duster, and a unique rifle was cradled in his arm, a Sharps with a gleaming telescopic sight. He didn't go to the house. He began a slow, casual inspection of the property. He was walking toward the barn. Pa, Matilda whispered. Get back to the house. Talk to Fry. Stall them. Tilly, no. Do it. Please, I'll hide. I'll hide him. Martin Torn looked at his daughter, then at the barn door. He gave a sharp, defeated nod and slipped out, circling around to the house. Matilda turned back to the cellar. Kyle was already on his feet. He had found a rusty hay hook, and he held it like a weapon. His lifeline was gone. He was a warrior again. He's coming, Kyle whispered. Get in the cellar, Matilda urged. All the way in. Pull the sacks over the door. He'll check it. Then we make sure he doesn't want to. She grabbed a bucket of rancid feed supplement, a foul-smelling mix of molasses and spoiled grain. I'll spill this. Make it look like a rat's nest. The footsteps stopped just outside the barn. A boot kicked the door, making it swing open with a bang. Anyone in here? A voice called. It was a high, thin whisper of a voice, unsettling. Matilda, hidden behind a stack of hay, held her breath. Kyle was in the cellar, the heavy trap door covered by mouldy sacks. The man in the duster stepped inside. He was Luke Whisper Harding. He was Fry's right hand, and as Cale would later confirm, Captain Pike's favorite problem solver. Harding moved like smoke. He checked the empty stalls. He nudged the lame Clementine, who snorted in protest. He walked past Matilda's hiding spot, so close she could smell the tobacco on his clothes. His eyes scanned the floor. He paused, his gaze fixed on the pile of feed sacks in the corner. Matilda's heart stopped. Harding walked over to the sacks. He nudged one with his boot. A cloud of dust and weevil-choked grain rose. He wrinkled his nose. He saw the dark, spilled stain of the feed supplement Matilda had strategically dumped. He saw the rats' droppings. He put his boot on the trap door, testing its weight. He leaned down as if to pull it open. Matilda's hand went to a small throwing knife she kept on her belt. Suddenly a shout came from the house. "Harding, get in here, we're done!" It was Fry's voice. Harding paused. He looked at the trap door, then back towards the house. He clearly didn't like leaving a stone unturned, but he also didn't want to get his hands dirty with spoiled grain. He spat a stream of tobacco juice onto the sacks just inches from the trapdoor handle. "Filth," he whispered. He turned and walked out, his rifle resting on his shoulder. Matilda sagged against the hay, her legs giving out. She waited a full minute, then scrambled to the trapdoor and pulled it open. Kyle emerged, his face grim. He was holding the hayhook. "You heard?" she asked. "I smelled him," Kyle said, his voice laced with venom. "Luke Harding. Whisper. He was the one. He shot me." Matilda's blood went cold. "He's working for Fry," she said, the pieces clicking into place. "Pike Fry. It is the same snake." Kyle repeated, his eyes burning. "But I saw something." "What? His rifle? The one with the glass eye. I saw it from the crack. He's proud of it. He was cleaning it the night before they shot me. I saw him stamp his initials. LH. On the stock. It's the one. He's not just a hired gun, Matilda. He's Pike's man." And now Pike's man was working for Barnaby Fry. The noose was tightening. "What did Fry want?" Kyle asked. The marshal was with him. Matilda said, a new sick feeling rising in her. He wouldn't bring the law just for a casual visit. She ran from the barn to the house. Her father was sitting at the kitchen table, his head in his hands. A piece of paper was on the table in front of him. "Pa, what is it?" Martin Bishop looked up. His face was the picture of utter defeat. "It's an eviction notice," Martin said, his voice hollow. "From Marshal Wade, officially filed. Fry, he didn't just buy the note Tilly. He bought the marshal. We have 48 hours. Or we'll be trespassing. 48 hours." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. "He can't do that." Matilda slammed her fist on the table. "He has," Martin said. "It's legal. It's all legal." He was broken. Matilda, however, was not. She was furious. She went back to the barn, her mind racing. When she entered, Kyle was not in the cellar. He was standing by the empty water trough, examining the intricate network of dry pipes her father had built years ago, trying to channel water from a well that had long since given up. 48 hours, she said bluntly. Kyle nodded. He had clearly overheard. "He is a man in a hurry." "He's a thief." "No," Kyle said, tapping the dry pipe with a finger. "He is a very smart man. He is not a thief. He is a conqueror. There is a difference." "What are you talking about?" "He's stealing our land." Kyle looked at her, his dark eyes intense. "No, Matilda. He is not stealing your land. Your land is worthless. He knows it. You know it. He is stealing your water." Matilda stared at him. "What water? This is a wasteland. The wells are dry." "The surface wells are dry," Kyle corrected. "The shallow wells. My people, we have known for a long time. The white eyes dig in the wrong places. They look for the rivers they can see. They do not listen for the rivers they cannot." He walked to the back of the barn, to the one wall that was built not of wood, but of the solid, sloping rock of the foothill itself. He placed his hand on it. "When I was scouting for Pike," he said, his voice low, "he had me mapping geology. I did not know why. I learned. I read his books, the ones he left open. He was not looking for tactical advantages. He was looking for this." He tapped the rock. "What?" Matilda demanded, grabbing his arm. "An aquifer, a deep-water river trapped underground. It flows from the mountains deep beneath this rock. It is a lake of fresh, cold water, just waiting." Matilda felt her knees go weak. "A lake under our land." "Under your barn," Kyle confirmed. "This whole way station, it is sitting on a gold mine, Matilda. Not of rock, but of water. In this territory, water is more valuable." It all made sense. The relentless pressure from Fry, the surveyors, the connection to Captain Pike, who was mapping geology. Fry wasn't buying a failed way station. He was buying the only source of permanent water for 100 miles. He could build a city here. He could sell the water to the railroad. He knows, Matilda whispered. Fry knows. Pike sold him the map, Kyle finished. My map. And you know this. Why, because, Kyle said, I made 2 copies. He reached into the tattered lining of his boot, the one she had painstakingly cleaned. He pulled out a small oilskin-wrapped packet. He unfolded it. It was a map drawn on army-grade paper. It showed the geological strata, the rock formations, and right where they were standing, a large blue-stippled area marked Deep Aquifer. A 50,000-gallon reserve. My God, Matilda breathed. Pike is not just corrupt, Kyle said. He is a fool. He left his private logs in his tent. I took the map, and I took the logbook, the one that details his payments to Fry, his plan to remove the local Apache, his orders to his men. Kyle, this is everything. This is proof. It is proof. Kyle agreed, his face grim. But it is useless. What do you mean, we can take this to Marshal Wade? The marshal who served you the eviction notice, Kyle countered. The one who rides with Fry. He is either bought or he is a coward. It is the same thing. No. This proof. He held up the map and the logbook. This only makes us more dangerous to them. It is not a shield. It is a target. He was right. If Fry knew this existed, he wouldn't just evict them. He would erase them. He would send Luke, Whisper Harding, to bury the evidence and them in the same grave. 48 hours, Matilda said again, but this time her voice was different. It wasn't despair. It was cold calculation. Fry's not just coming back to evict us, is he? He's coming back to make sure we're quiet. Yes, Cale said. He will not risk us talking. He will bring Harding. Then we won't be quiet, Matilda said, her eyes finding the old rifle her father kept mounted over the fireplace. And we won't be here. Wait, Martin's voice said from the doorway. He had been standing there listening. His face was no longer a mask of defeat. It was pale but set. He's right. My daughter. She's right. We're not running. He looked at Kyle. This whole time, I've been trying to survive. I forgot how to fight. This is our home. That water. It's our water. He walked over to Kyle. You're an Apache. I am, Kyle said. And I'm a scared old man, Martin said. But you're welcome in my home. If you'll stand with us. Kyle looked at Martin, then at Matilda. He looked at the map in his hand. They are coming to kill us for this land, Kyle said. It is a good day to disappoint them. They didn't have 48 hours. They had less than 24. Fry, confident in his legal victory, had made a mistake. He and his men, including Marshal Wade, had ridden back to the small township of Sandstone Reach to file the paperwork, and more importantly, to celebrate. Matilda knew this because she rode Clementine into town under the cover of dusk, a thing she hadn't done in weeks. She hid in the shadows of the alley across from the saloon. She watched Fry, Wade, and Harding drinking at a table near the window. They were laughing. The sight of it hardened her resolve into something razor-sharp. She didn't just watch, she acted. She went to the livery where a young man named Peter, whose family had also been squeezed by Fry, worked. She gave him the last of her father's good money. Peter, she said, I need you to ride to Fort Grant. Now. I need you to find a Colonel Robert Anderson. He's the main commander. Give him this. She handed him a hastily scrawled note. It didn't mention Cale. It simply said, Captain Gregory Pike is a traitor. Selling army maps to Barnaby Fry. Has hired men to murder settlers at Bishop's Respite to cover his tracks. proof at way station. Send help." Peter's eyes went wide. "Tilly, this is treason," she said. "And it's the truth. Will you ride?" He nodded, his jaw set. "Fry ruined my pa. I'll ride." She returned to the way station. There was no guarantee Peter would make it, or that Colonel Anderson would even believe him. They were on their own. They spent the night preparing. It wasn't a fortress, but it was their land. Martin, his hands surprisingly steady, oiled his old 1873 Winchester. Matilda, armed with her father's shotgun, laid out shells on the porch. Kyle became someone else. The weak, feverish man was gone. He was quiet, efficient, and lethal. He moved around the way station, checking sight lines, creating small surprises, as he called them. He loosened the hinges on the water trough, balancing it so a single kick would send it crashing. He dug shallow pits in the dust of the main path. "They will expect us to be in the house," Kyle explained, his voice a low monotone. "That is a tomb. We fight from the land, not on it." He took Martin's rifle. "Your father is a good man. He must stay in the house. He will shoot from the window. But he is not to come out." "And us?" Matilda asked. "We are the rats," Kyle said, a grim smile touching his lips. "We are in the walls. You take the barn. I will take the stable. Harding, he is mine." Dawn came. The same dawn that had illuminated Cale's face in the cave. This time it felt like a timer clicking down to 0. At 8 a.m. they came. 5 riders, Barnaby Fry Marshall, Wade, Luke, Whisper, Harding, and the 2 other hired guns. They rode in slow, arrogant. "Martin Bishop." Fry called out, stopping his horse 50 yards from the house. "Your time is up. Come out with your hands raised. The county is seizing this property for non-payment of debt." The house was silent. "Martin," Fry shouted again, his patience slipping. "Don't make this difficult." "He's not making it difficult, Mr. Fry." Matilda's voice called out, clear and loud from the barn loft. All 5 men turned. Their guns, which had been resting, were suddenly in their hands. "Miss Bishop," Fry said, his voice a silky, dangerous purr. "I am disappointed. Please come down. This is official business." "Is it official business?" "Marshal Wade," Matilda called. "Or is it just business?" The marshal, to his credit, looked ashamed. He wouldn't meet her gaze. Harding Fry said, "Get her, and find the old man." Harding smiled. It was a terrible sight. He swung down from his horse, his long duster sweeping the dust. "My pleasure." He started walking toward the barn. "Kyle now," Matilda whispered. From the stable, 50 yards to Harding's left, a voice rang out. "Luke Harding." Harding froze. He knew that voice. He spun, bringing his rifle up. Kyle stepped out from the shadows of the stable. He was holding nothing but the oilskin packet. "You forgot this at Fort Grant. Captain Pike's logbook." Harding's dead eyes widened. He hadn't been expecting this. Fry, seeing his prize, the evidence in the hands of an Apache, lost his composure. "Shoot him!" Fry screamed. "Shoot them both! Kill them all!" The 2 hired guns raised their rifles, and that's when Martin Bishop from the bedroom window fired his Winchester. The shot was perfect. It hit the dirt just in front of the lead gunman's horse. The horse reared, throwing its rider. All hell broke loose. The confrontation exploded into a chaotic, dusty firefight. Harding, the professional, ignored his fallen comrade. He had one target. He dropped to one knee, bringing the Sharps rifle to his shoulder, the telescopic sight glinting. He was aiming for Kyle. "No!" Matilda shouted. She fired the shotgun from the loft. The buckshot was too far to be lethal, but it was enough. The spray of lead kicked up dust and tore at Harding's duster, forcing him to flinch. The rifle shot went wild, splintering the stable post where Cale's head had been a second before. Cale was gone, vanishing back into the shadows. The second hired gun was firing at the house, trying to pin Martin down. Fry and Marshal Wade had scrambled behind their wagon. "Get that engine!" Fry shrieked, firing his small pistol wildly. Harding, his face a mask of rage, reloaded. He knew Kyle was in the stable. He started to advance, using the horse trough as cover. "Matilda!" Kyle's voice shouted. "The trough!" Matilda understood. She had a clear shot from the loft. She didn't aim for Harding. She aimed for the small wooden pin Kyle had shown her. She fired the second barrel. The shot echoed like a cannon. The pin shattered. Harding had just reached the trough when the hinges gave way. The trough, holding 50 gallons of stagnant, slimy water, tipped over, collapsing on top of him. It was a tidal wave of mud and green water. He came up sputtering, his rifle fouled his duster, weighing him down. He was a perfect target, and Cale was standing 10 feet away, holding the rusty hay hook. Harding, panicking, dropped his useless rifle and drew his pistol. He fired twice. Kyle ducked the bullets, whistling past. Kyle didn't charge. He just waited. Meanwhile, the first hired gun, the one who had been thrown, got to his feet. He saw Martin in the window and raised his rifle. "Pa!" Matilda screamed. But Martin was ready. He fired not at the man, but at the old cracked bell they used to call for dinner. The bullet pinged off it, and the man flinched. It was the only distraction Martin needed. His second shot took the man in the shoulder. He went down, howling. "It's over, Fry!" Martin yelled from the window. "We have proof your man Pike is a traitor!" Marshal Wade stood up from behind the wagon, his hands raised. "Don't shoot, I'm still the law here." He looked at Fry, his face a mix of fear and disgust. It's over, Barnaby." "It's not over," Fry screamed. He grabbed the marshal's pistol from its holster. "It's my land, my water." He leveled the pistol, not at Martin, not at Matilda, but at the last remaining threat. Luke Harding, having just cleared his eyes, was a sitting duck. Kyle was advancing on him. "No witnesses!" "Luke," Fry sneered. He fired. But Kyle was faster. He had seen the shift. He tackled Harding, pushing him down, saving him, just as the bullet tore through the air where Harding's chest had been. Fry, enraged, turned the gun on Kyle. A single shot rang out. Clean! Final! Fry's pistol clattered to the dust. He looked down, confused at the new dark stain on his wool vest. He turned his eyes wide and looked at the man he had betrayed. "Luke, whisper." Harding was on one knee, his own pistol smoking. "You shot me," Fry stammered. "You tried to—" Harding whispered, his voice cold. "But you missed. I don't." He stood up, looked at Kyle and gave a single curt nod. A professional courtesy. Fry collapsed. He was not dead, but he was done. Silence. The dust began to settle. The wounded gunman was moaning. Marshal Wade was shaking. Martin Bishop slowly emerged from the house, his Winchester held low, and from the east a new sound. Hoofbeats. Many of them. A column of blue-coated cavalry was riding hard, led by an older man with silver sideburns. "Colonel Anderson," Kyle said, standing up. Peter had made it. The dust of the firefight had barely settled before it was joined by a new, larger cloud approaching from the east. It was not the desperate swirling grit of the way station, but the organized rhythmic plume of a cavalry column. Peter had made it. At their head rode an older man with silver sideburns and a uniform that bore the weight of command. He took in the scene with a single sweeping glance. Barnaby Fry, groaning on the ground, clutching his bleeding gut. The wounded hired gun, guarded by a grim-faced Martin Bishop. The terrified, shaking Marshal Wade. And the two figures who seemed to be the calm center of the storm, Matilda on the barn loft, and Cale by the stables, the hay hook still held loosely in his hand. Colonel Robert Anderson. Kyle said his voice, low. He dropped the hayhook. It clattered in the sudden, profound silence. Colonel Anderson dismounted before his horse even stopped. His eyes found Cale, and then the oilskin packet Cale held out. Anderson took the logbook, his face a mask of cold integrity. He flipped through 2 pages, his expression hardening with every line he read. He looked at Fry, then at Marshal Wade. "Treason," Anderson said. The word was not loud, but it cut through the morning air like a knife. The aftermath was as swift and brutal as the firefight had been. "Marshal Wade," Anderson commanded, his voice filled with contempt. "You are a disgrace to your office and a party to sedition. You are relieved of duty." He signaled 2 of his men. "My soldiers will escort Mr. Fry and his associates to Fort Grant. They will stand trial for conspiracy, attempted murder, and treason against the United States Army." Fry, his face a pasty, sweating gray, tried to speak. "It was a business deal. The water. You conspired with a traitor to steal government property and murder civilians." "Mr. Fry," Anderson said, turning his back, "your business is over." As the soldiers hauled the men away, Luke, whisper. Harding, his hands bound, paused. He was not looking at the colonel or his former employer. He was looking at Cale. He gave a single curt nod. It was not an apology. It was a professional courtesy, a silent acknowledgement from one predator to another. Kyle, his face impassive, nodded back once. The debt for the push that saved his life was paid. A week passed, and then a month. The bishop's respite was transformed. The sound of gunfire was replaced by the sound of hammers. The smell of fear was replaced by the scent of fresh-cut lumber, and miraculously, the cool, damp smell of water. With the army's official backing and the deed legally restored to Martin Bishop, the well was dug. Not a shallow, hopeful hole, but a deep, confident well, right where Cale's map had said to dig. The first bucket of clear, cold water that breached the surface felt like a baptism. The bishop's respite sign was taken down. A new one was raised, freshly painted, Bishop's Respite and Aquifer. The railroad hearing of a permanent guaranteed water source rerouted its survey. They were coming. Hope, which had been as brittle as the soil, was now as real and constant as the water beneath their feet. Martin Bishop, who had been a man worn down to a nub, now stood tall, a proprietor. Through it all, Cale stayed. He worked alongside Martin, his strength returning his wound, healing into a puckered scar. He was quiet, but his presence was a constant, until the day the work was truly done. Matilda found him in the barn. The barn itself was a symbol of their new life. The stalls were mended, the roof was patched, and Clementine, her limp now, just a memory, was happily munching on fresh feed. Kyle was standing by the new pump, watching the small, steady drip of water from the spout. He had his small bag at his feet. He was wearing the new shirt her father had bought him, but he was packing his old tattered one. "So it's true," Matilda said, her voice softer than she intended. She'd known this was coming. He turned his face, calm. "It is time. Colonel Anderson was here yesterday, while you were out," she said, leaning against a post. "He's very impressed with you. He said he's never seen a scout as good. He offered you your job back. A promotion, he said. A hero, he called you." Kyle looked down at the water pump. "He is a good man," he said, his voice thoughtful. "But he is one man, and he is a man of the army." He looked up, his dark eyes meeting hers. "I cannot be his bridge." A bridge. It is what he called me. What Pike called me. Kyle said the name still carrying a sting. A bridge between your world and mine. But a bridge, Matilda, is a dead thing. It is made of wood and stone, and it is walked on, from both sides, until it splinters. I was not a bridge. I was a tool for men like Pike." He picked up the oilskin-wrapped logbook from a workbench. It too was a survivor. This is what matters now. Pike's logbook, he's already in prison. This is not just proof against one man. Kyle explained, his voice intense. It is a key. It is a map of their minds. How they think, how they see the land, how they use treaties and banks and new laws to acquire. My elders, they understand the war of arrows and rifles. They are losing the war of paper. He held up the book. I cannot be a bridge for the white eyes. But maybe I can be a lifeline for my own. He used the word. Lifeline. The word he had given her in the dawn. The word that now felt like a chasm opening between them. "So you're choosing a side," she said, and she hated the small, sharp ache in her voice. After all this, he took a step closer. The air between them was thick with things unsaid, the shared pain, the fight, the long nights of his fever. "I am choosing my people, Matilda, just as you chose yours." He reached out his hand, moving slow. He didn't touch her face. He gently, so gently, it was barely a sensation, traced the faint, pale scar on her neck, where the rope burn had been. "This is your proof. You chose to pull. You chose to fight. You chose your father and this land." She didn't flinch from his touch. She held his gaze. "You saved my life, and you saved ours," she whispered. "This place, my father, all of it." A small, rare smile touched his lips. The water was always there, he said, his hand dropping. "You just needed someone to tell you where to dig. And when to fight," she added, her voice a little stronger. "And when to fight," he agreed. The silence stretched full and heavy. This was it, the last moment. "Kyle," she started, but there were no words. Thank you was too small. Stay was impossible. He saw the conflict in her eyes and offered his hand a formal settler's gesture. She looked at his outstretched hand, then at his face. She shook her head. Stepping forward, she closed the distance and wrapped her arms around him. It was not a romantic embrace. It was a hug of shared history of trauma and survival. It was a collision of two worlds. She felt the solid, healed muscle of his back, the steady beat of his heart. He was real. He was leaving. He was surprised by the gesture, his body stiffening for a second, before his own arms came up, holding her for one brief, strong, necessary moment. She pulled away first, her face flushed, and she brushed a non-existent piece of dust from her sleeve. "Will you come back?" she asked, the one question she couldn't hold inside. He shouldered his small bag. He looked past her, out the wide open barn doors at the land. It was no longer a wasteland. It was a home. "This is your land, Matilda Bishop. You have a deed. You have the water. It is yours." He turned his gaze back to her. "My land is still in question. My home is a memory I must fight to rebuild." He walked to the barn door and paused, silhouetted against the bright noonday sun. "But I will not forget the woman who dragged me through the dunes. You taught me that one person can be stronger than the desert." He walked out. He did not say goodbye. He just went. Matilda followed, standing on the porch of the new, busy respite. Her father came out and stood beside her, placing a calloused, comforting hand on her shoulder. They watched together as Kyle walked east toward the mountains, toward his people. He did not look back. He walked with a purpose, a lone, dark figure against the gold and red of the dunes. He crested the rise, the same rise that had once hidden him, and then he was gone. Martin squeezed her shoulder. He's a good man, Tilly. Yes, Pa. He is. She stayed on the porch long after her father went back inside to serve a new customer. The air was warm, but the breeze from the mountains was cool. It carried the scent of water, not dust. She was no longer a girl, and he was no longer a savage. She was no longer the girl angry at the dust. She was the woman who owned the water. She was the woman who had faced down Barnaby Fry. She looked at her own hands. The rope-burn scars were faint now, almost invisible, but she could still feel them. She had been his lifeline, and in the end, by showing her what was worth fighting for, by giving her back her home and her future, he had been hers. This story shows us that the Wild West wasn't just about cowboys and outlaws. It was about survival, and the lines people were willing to cross to get what they wanted. But it's also about the lines they wouldn't cross. Matilda could have left Cale to the desert, but her humanity was stronger than her fear. Cale could have used his knowledge for revenge, but he chose to use it to protect his people. They were two people from different worlds, caught in a dust storm of greed and corruption, who ended up becoming the one thing the other person needed to survive. What do you think was Matilda right to risk everything for a stranger? What would you have done? These real-life dramas show us just how powerful a single decision can be. If you were moved by this story of survival and unlikely alliances, please hit that like button. It truly helps the channel. Share this video with someone you know who loves a story with real grit. And most importantly, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next story. Thank you for watching.